Now let us take a closer look at the practice of awakening the soul. You have to transfer your consciousness into your supratemporal individuality and make it think, feel, speak, and act. In the broadcasting The Secret of Immortality, we had already spoken about how you can transfer your consciousness into your eternal individuality. The decisive step is taken when you affirm, I am a soul. Be aware, you are the being of spirit that incarnates on its eternal path in various perishable bodies. Everything else follows automatically from this realization. The consciousness must rest in the top of the human pyramid, not in the physical body, but in the soul. Transfer your consciousness into the charioteer of the quadriga, who controls the physical body, the body of feelings, the body of instincts, and the body of thoughts from above. During sleep, your consciousness is already in the subtle body. To move it to the fiery body is the next step. That is difficult to understand and even harder to practice. I know. Let me try to explain it as simply as possible. When your consciousness rests in your eternal individuality, what do you do before you think, feel, utter, or execute anything? You ask your heart. The heart is the most important organ of your eternal individuality. It tells the charioteer infallibly what is right and what is wrong, where he has to direct his 4 horses. We shall talk about that instantly in more detail. The old man uses the intellect, the new man, the heart. In raising from 4 to 2 legs a physical, today a mental evolutionary step is to be taken. Fill your soul with consciousness. We proceed further. If the soul hidden within you is to come to life, it must first form an awareness of itself. What do you mean by that? Let us go back to the example of a newborn child. For a baby to be able to develop independently, it first has to differentiate itself from its surroundings. In the womb, it thinks that it is a part of its mother. It must become aware of its own existence, which is separate from everything else. This happens, for example, by cutting the umbilical cord, receiving its own name, giving a name to its parents and to the objects in its environment. As for a toddler, I understand, but what does that mean for the soul? At the moment, your soul is still so small that it has hardly any self-awareness at all. It does not even know that it exists. How should it then consciously think, feel, speak, or act? Therefore, proceed to cut the cord. separate, mentally of course, your spiritual being from your body and give it a name that marks its own independent individuality. Be aware, your soul is an independent creature, clearly separated from all other beings and objects in your environment. That is hard for me to follow. Body and soul are, after all, inextricably linked. The soul penetrates my body and expresses itself in each of its movements. Did we not just say the human pyramid is a unitary entity? Yes, attention well paid. This is how many people think who have difficulties making this immensely important step. However, as with the baby, you cannot dispense with this painful partitioning. The unity of the 3 stages of the human pyramid does not change the fact that the individual levels, physical body, bodies of feelings, instincts and thoughts, as well as theory body, have to develop separately and one after the other. Your eternal individuality already existed before birth and will continue to exist after death, without the body. From this follows its autonomous existence, independent of the body. Only during the short time of the material incarnation does the soul live in symbiosis with the body. As long as it does not realize that, the eternal path of a self-contained development, independent of the many short-lived bodies, is blocked to the soul. Only after the cutting of the cord, the further steps of the life of the soul will become possible, about which we now want to speak. Your eternal individuality, not unlike a child which is to grow up, must recognize and satisfy its needs, form a will of its own, carry out its mission, and learn to think, feel, speak and act independently. Partly, as we shall see, even against the body, as the baby may one day have to go against its own mother. Every molecule of living matter embodies an embryonic, a rudimentary soul that is on its way to self-conscious existence. We go one step further. Your eternal individuality must form an awareness of self that is alive not only during the present-day earthly sojourn. This consciousness must last when the soul returns to its homeland, the supermundane world, after the death of the body. And exactly the same self-awareness must continue to subsist when one day in the distant future, maybe only after centuries, you return to the earth for another incarnation. Suppose you have decided your supratemporal individuality is called anima, and it is a disciple of the Brotherhood. Then you have to be again anima, and again a disciple of the Brotherhood, not only after death in heaven, but above all, during your next stay on earth. If this self-awareness is lost at some point during the long journey, for example after death, in the transition to the upper world, then you form there, or later when you return to Earth, a new, completely different awareness of self. In this way, with constantly changing identities in the course of your eternal path, you cannot form a unitary, self-contained eternal individuality. Thereby, you are just creating many different temporary personalities who cease to exist already after leaving the respective level. Can you give an example? It is assumed that the individuals mentioned in the Book of Sacrifice of the Teaching, Leaves of Moriah's Garden, Part 1, namely Kurnovu, Salomon, Al-Almink, Shaykh Rasul ibn Rahim, Origen, Sergius of Radonesh, and Emperor Akbar the Great, were all incarnations of Mahatma Moriah. Now, a great spirit, like a Mahatma, cannot incarnate at all if he risks forgetting his true identity on the way down, or while staying on earth, or upon returning to the higher world. Likewise, you, too, have to preserve, without interruption, on all levels, in all worlds, the consciousness that you are the incarnation of a disciple of the Brotherhood, or of a king of the spirit. Otherwise, you will lose this position. How can I manage to maintain an identity as a disciple for all eternity, in all worlds? That seems to be a rather difficult task. Indeed, this is an exercise pointing far into the future. We can only indicate two aspects here. We had already talked about the transition into the other world without interruption of consciousness. What was said there is also applicable to maintaining self-awareness during all changes of existence. Furthermore, you have to establish and keep up the closest possible connection to your teacher. So close that he immediately reveals himself to you on every new level. That means he awaits you on the threshold in the afterlife and contacts you in a new incarnation already in the age of childhood, as was the case with Helena Röhrig. Then you will quickly find your way back into your role as a disciple in every new material or spiritual world. The silvery thread connecting a disciple to his teacher is not lost at the death of the body, but survives all transitions, if only it is strong enough.